Hey, how's it going everyone? So for today's video I'm going to show you how to replace a wheel stud. Now a wheel stud is going to support the wheel and tire assembly on an axle shaft or a hub assembly. In this particular example I'm going to be installing a wheel stud on an axle shaft that's already out of the vehicle, so that we can have a little bit better view of how it's done. Now wheel studs can fail for a number of different reasons. They can get cross-threaded, they can be over torqued and snap, they can have necking on the threads, corrosion, any number of things can cause these wheel studs to necessitate replacement. Removing them is pretty straightforward. There's a spline fit on the end of the hub, or axle flange in our case, that this will press into, so you're just going to use a big old hammer and whack this out. Installing this, you do need a special tool to do so. I'm going to show you how to make your own special tool with a old serpentine belt idler. Now at the particular shop I work at, I work on a lot of off-road vehicles, and anytime these sealed bearings get wet, they tend to start to make noise. So this particular pulley is making noise on a serpentine drive system on a Jeep, but it's good for the purposes of what we're doing today. So what I need to do is I need to remove the sealed bearing from the actual pulley assembly itself. To do that, there's a couple different ways you can do that. You can use a hydraulic press with sockets or drivers that are the right size. I find what's best with these plastic pulleys is to just cut it with a large 3-inch die grinder. That way you don't run the risk of wrecking the cage or wrecking the dust seal for these sealed bearings. Other than that, we'll just need a new lug nut and a good hard washer that the inner race can ride on. So what I'll do now is I will cut this bearing off, or cut the bearing out of the pulley, and then we'll get to installing the wheel stud. Alright, so with the pulley plastic removed, the bearing's ready to go. Again, this bearing is considered failed for a serpentine system, but it's going to be okay for our uses. It's just going to be used to install the stud on. You get about 3 or 4 uses out of these, but they can last a while if you take the time to pop off the grease cover and add some grease to them. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our wheel stud and we're going to slide it through the back of the hub assembly of this axle shaft. And again, these splines are going to engage into splines that are in the hub. And then from here, I find it's best to install a real big heavy washer for the inner race of our pulley to ride on. And then we just thread on a new lug nut. Now, the lug nut has the taper to it, so it'll self-center itself on the bearing. And once we get the assembly tight like that, we can use an impact gun and drive in the stud. We can see the splines are starting to engage into the back of the hub face. So we're going to tighten up our lug nut. It's going to be able to spin freely because of the ball bearing, and that will then suck in the stud. So we'll do that right now. All right, so with that, once the gun starts to bottom out, you stop. You don't want to overstretch this and need to replace the stud again. So we're flush with the back face of the hub, just like the other studs that are installed. So at this point, we're just going to back out. And we're going to remove our bearing, and now we have a fresh wheel stud installed onto our axle shaft. So again, these are, you know, relatively easy to get. As long as you take care of them, they have a couple uses out of them. In the shop that I work at, we replace those things all the time. So saves you about 30-40 bucks of actually having to buy the actual tool that's for that, and it works just as good, because ultimately the tool you're going to buy is just a ball bearing as well. So I appreciate you taking the time to watch the video. I will see you in the next one.